Hey there, English 345 students. Welcome to week 2. I hope week 1 has gone well, that you're settled into your classes, you've got a routine going on, and that you found your way around our Blackboard site as well. So I think it's always a good idea when you start off each week just to make sure that you're clicking on the course information link over here on the left side, and always take a look at the course calendar. I've attached it separately from the syllabus, so it's quick and easy to do that. So we'll go ahead and just open it up and take a quick look. Okay, so once we get it open here, you can see that in week 1, we've covered some of the foundational kinds of topics. In Module 1, you've worked on exercises 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. So that was introducing our course, learning to think of linguistics as a science, and some fundamental principles that you need to know before we go on to other topics. So coming up this week, you'll see that we have the rest of Module 1 due. That's 1.4 through 1.6. I see a few of you have already jumped into that. Good for you. And if not, that's fine too. You've got this entire week to work on those topics. Okay, as you look through the rest of the calendar, it's always good just to take a look at what might be coming up in other weeks as well. You can see for the research project, anything that's in bold in this assignments column, you know that you have a component of your research project due. So in week 5, you've got the proposal for that. You're welcome to look in the Module 3 folder to be able to see the instructions for that if you want to look ahead. Of course, you don't have to do this yet. And week 10 is the annotated bibliography for the research project. A draft of that project is due in week 12. And then finally, the entire project is due at the very end of the semester. So it's just a good idea to take a look at that just so you know what's coming up. All right, so back to our Blackboard course. We're going to go into course modules and into Module 1. Okay, so you will see I'm going to post any videos that have any kind of instructions or sort of a tour through the assignments for that week here at the top of every module folder. So you see basically the course orientation here that you would have watched last week. The video that you're watching right now is going to go underneath. So there will probably be a couple of videos guiding you through the assignments in that module for each week. So just look out for that, and I will label them accordingly. So the video that gets placed under this one will be the Module 1 Week 2 video. All right. So this week you introduced yourselves to each other. I'm still getting to know some of you through those. Always be aware that any comments that I leave to you on assignments, when you click on My Grades, I'll go there just for a second, and you'll see a comment bubble will show up next to these scores if I've left you feedback on an assignment. So make sure you check that. Always take a look at my feedback. All right, so back over to Module 1. All right, so as I was saying, you did your introductions. I'm still learning lots of great things about all of you. You did your first reading assignment from Essentials of Linguistics. We will use this book in a few different modules throughout the course. I think it's a great introductory textbook. I love that it has videos incorporated into it. The author, Catherine Anderson, gives some very clear, very helpful explanations of some complicated topics. And I think it's just a great way to get introduced to linguistics as a field. So you learn to think of linguistics as a science, as a social science, and you went ahead and took your first quiz on that. 9 ideas about language. Okay, I'm still taking a look at some of your responses and your responses to each other as well in the discussion forum. I think this is a great foundational assignment for us to go forward. Some of the ideas that you learned from this reading, I think one of the most foundational ones was about children, that children learn language quickly, efficiently. They're also the drivers of change in language. You learned that language change is normal. normal that languages change over time, that the judgments we might make about each other, about different dialects or different versions of a language, these are just a matter of taste. New generations bring new words, new ideas, new ways of expressing things in each generation that comes along. I see this in my children all the time. They already use words that I've never heard of, and I have to ask them sometimes, wait, where'd you get that from? So this is totally normal. And other things that you learned from the 9 ideas about language, that languages have rules. And when we talk about rules, we're not talking about the grammar rules that come from the grammar book that you're supposed to follow whenever you write an English essay. It's that languages have structure, they have syntax, they have word order, rules that are embedded into our brains no matter what language we speak. And this is something called universal grammar, kind of an idea put out there by Noam Chomsky. If you don't know about Noam Chomsky, go ahead and look him up. He's the one that came up with this idea that we were born with this natural language ability, and that every human being learns a language or acquires a language from the time they're born, no matter what language they're exposed to. And so that's, for that reason, linguists don't place value judgments on the different ways people speak, because everybody has this ability. They just express it in different ways in different societies and different cultures. Another thing that you might have learned from the 9 ideas is that writing and speaking are 2 very different things. Okay, everybody learns to speak a language, even if your parents didn't teach you explicitly. Just by talking to you, you learn to speak. It just happens naturally. But writing is something that you have to learn. You have to be taught how to do that. So, there are many different ways that we use language to express ourselves. So we'll keep on building on these ideas and learning more about them as we go through the whole semester. Okay. So the assignments that you have for this week, I've put a graphic here, and you'll see that I'll do that. I'll kind of intersperse these throughout your assignments. This is a graphic called Cognitive Science and Linguistics, and in the middle of this graphic you see cognitive science, this big giant social scientific field with all these other related fields. So from cognitive science, we have psychology, biology, computer science, language science, philosophy. All of these in some way are related to cognitive science, because cognitive science or cognition is about thinking, the way our brains operate. So linguistics is kind of the intersection between language science and cognitive science. So I think it's really helpful to be able to see that visually and to be able to think about the relationship between cognitive science, the study of the brain and how it operates, and how language works. Okay, so your assignments for this week. The first one is going to be a reading and a quiz, so it's all about the mental grammar. And here, let me emphasize that when we talk about grammar, we are not talking about the prescriptive, and you might have already gotten that distinction from the 9 ideas about language reading. There's prescriptive language rules and descriptive language rules. Prescriptive means your elementary school English teacher told you to use who instead of whom in certain situations. That's a prescriptive rule. It's what people think we should do to make our language beautiful or work properly, but these are all attitudes that come from our society, from the people around us. Descriptive means that linguists simply observe what people do and how they use their language, and they report on that. They don't assign a value judgment to it. That's a certain piece of language or use of language is wrong or right. So when we talk about mental grammar, we're really just talking about the way language functions in our brains. We're not talking about correct or incorrect grammar rules. So it's kind of an interesting distinction, because you might not have thought of language in this way before. When you write an essay for an English class, you're used to getting, the red pen markup on it, and fix this and fix that and fix this. But we're not thinking of language in that way. When we talk about the grammar, we're talking about the way it functions, almost like a computer program in the brain. So you'll learn about the components of mental grammar in assignment 1.4. In assignment 1.5, you're going to keep on going in Essentials of Linguistics. And here you're going to be looking at basically how creative we are with our language. And I don't necessarily mean in a poetic sense or a literary sense, but how every sentence that comes out of our mouth is unique. It has a unique structure. I mean, all English sentences have a structure we can recognize and understand, but every utterance that we produce is not necessarily like someone else's, but we still understand each other. That's the amazing thing. I can come up with a sentence that no one's ever said before, or very few people have ever said before, but you will understand me if I say it. So our language is very flexible, very creative. The other aspect of our language is that it's very generative. So if a rule exists, a grammatical rule exists in our brain, such as in English, subject, verb, object, that's the word order of an English sentence. The subject comes first, followed by the verb and the object. So that rule exists for all English speakers. We expect sentences to be built that way. So because we expect sentences to be built that way, we can create an infinite number of subject, verb, object sentences. So that allows us to generate more and more and more sentences using that same rule. The article that's included here along with the reading in Essentials of Linguistics, it's one that really caught my attention from NPR maybe a couple of years back, about how the song Purple Rain, I think there was a movie made of it several years ago with Prince, and they tried to come up with a redo of this movie in, I believe it was a country in North Africa. But in the language of that country, I think it's the Tamajek language, that's right. So in that language, they don't have a specific word for the color purple. So when they did the translation of that, they had to basically say, red with a little blue mixed in or something to be able to express that concept. So it kind of emphasizes the creativity of language. If we don't happen to have an exact word for something in our language that another language does have, we find ways to still express it. Every language has all of these tools at its disposal to be able to explain or express a concept. So you're going to be reading that section in Chapter 1 of Essentials of Linguistics, reading the article about Purple Rain. It's a short one, but it's very interesting. And then see if you can find your own supposedly untranslatable word from any language and share it in your discussion post for this one. So you'll be doing a discussion post based on the reading, and then kind of do a little bit of your own research to see if you can find some interesting words to share. I've given you some search terms that might make it a little bit easier. You should find a lot of good results from those search terms. So how are creativity and generativity in language related? And then go ahead and reply to a couple of your classmates and kind of react to the words that they found. It might be kind of interesting to see how different languages express different concepts. And if you are looking for something fun to do, you can watch this funny commercial about translation and how it can cause some interesting things to happen when it doesn't always go perfectly. Okay, and finally, your last assignment is Fundamental Properties of Language. So again, you'll have another reading from Essentials of Linguistics, and in this one, it's a journal assignment, so you'll just be giving some brief answers to the questions that you see there. So explain what she means when she says that all languages have grammar. Again, are we talking about those prescriptive grammar rules that I mentioned a little while ago, or are we talking about a different kind of grammar, the mental grammar, maybe? Okay, so what would you say if someone told you that Quebec French is not real French? What would a linguist say about this? Would they agree with that? Why or why not? What does she mean when she says that all languages are equally valid? Okay, so there are thousands of languages in the world. Are some of them better than others? Yes, no, why or why not? Some properties of all languages that they have in common. What are some things that you learned about in the reading? And then you can share a personal experience. Can you think of an example of a language change you've observed in your own life? I think we all have. I've noticed words and expressions come and go in my own lifetime, or words and expressions that were trendy when I was a college student, and maybe they wouldn't be now. So you can share a personal experience there. Okay, so to sum it up, in 1.4, you've got a short reading and a quiz. In 1.5, you've got a discussion forum, so you'll be chatting with your classmates about this topic a little bit. And then finally in 1.6, you've got a journal entry. So I think that gives us a good selection of activities for this week. That is going to conclude the fundamentals we need to know about linguistics before we move on to Module 2, which is going to be all about the sound system of languages. It's one of the most interesting subfields of linguistics for me. I used to be a musician years ago. I guess I still am one. But because of that, I've always found the connection between music and language really interesting. So the sound system is an area of language that I think you'll really enjoy. Okay, so any questions that you have about this week's assignments or anything you learned about last week, don't hesitate to send me an email, drop by my virtual office hours. I'll show you really quickly where those are back in this course modules area. I went ahead and posted some direct links to the separate days of those office hours. So on Mondays and Wednesdays, you've got 2:15 to 4:15, and then Fridays from 1 to 3. So you would just click on that link directly. During those times, it'll bring you directly to Blackboard Collaborate, and I will be there waiting for you. Okay, so that's everything for this week. Have a great week. Get in touch if you need anything, and I'll see you all next week.